The scarred arrival. The security scanner hummed as Hyun stepped through the checkpoint. He carried only a small bag and wore simple clothes, looking like any other traveler passing through orbital station Epsilon 7. The station buzzed with activity. Dozens of alien species moved through the massive halls conducting trade and business at the edge of known space. The scanner beeped once, then twice. Then it began screaming. Red lights flooded the checkpoint. Metal barriers slammed down from the ceiling, sealing off the entire security section. Hyun stopped walking and sighed quietly. He had hoped this wouldn't happen today. Within seconds, 12 security officers surrounded him. They belonged to different species, all holding weapons that hummed with charged energy. The largest officer stepped forward. His name was Vril, and his insect-like body towered over Hyun. Multiple eyes focused on the human while mandibles clicked nervously. "Don't move," Vril said, his translator converting the words into standard galactic speech. "You've triggered every threat alert we have." Hyun raised his hands slowly. "I'm just passing through. I have documentation." Vril's eyes shifted to a holographic display that appeared beside him. The security chief's entire body went rigid as he read the information. His mandibles stopped clicking. Around him, other officers leaned in to read the display, and one by one they backed away from Hyun. "This can't be right," Vril whispered. "The scanner must be broken." "What does it say?" Hyun asked, though he already knew. Vril looked at him with something that might have been fear or awe or both. "It says you were at ground zero when a planet-killer weapon fired. It says you survived." The security chief paused. Nothing survives a planet-killer weapon. The checkpoint had gone completely silent. Every being within sight had stopped moving. They stared at Hyun with wide eyes and frozen expressions. Some began backing away slowly. "I need to see your documentation," Vril said. His voice shook slightly. "And I need you to explain those scars." Hyun pulled a data chip from his pocket and handed it over. "My travel papers are all legal. I work as a freight coordinator. I'm here to arrange a shipment to the outer colonies." Vril inserted the chip into his reader. The documentation appeared valid. Everything was in order. But the security chief couldn't stop staring at the scan results. The pattern of scarring across Hyun's chest and back was distinctive. Thermal burns, plasma weapon traces, and radiation poisoning markers formed a specific signature that matched only one known event in galactic history. "Take off your shirt," Vril ordered. Hyun hesitated, then slowly unbuttoned his simple work shirt. He pulled it off and stood bare-chested under the harsh station lights. The security officers gasped. Several stepped back further. One dropped his weapon entirely. The scars covered Hyun's chest and wrapped around to his back. They weren't random. They formed a pattern, like a map of energy spreading out from a central point. The tissue was twisted and pale, healed but never truly recovered. Anyone with military training could recognize what they were looking at. "By the void," Vril breathed. "It's real. Can I put my shirt back on?" Hyun asked quietly. Before Vril could answer, another voice cut through the checkpoint. "Stand down. Let me through." The crowd parted for a human woman in diplomatic robes. She was younger than Hyun, perhaps in her late 20s, with sharp eyes and confident movements. Her name badge identified her as Jiwon, assistant to the human ambassador. "I'm here to verify this man's identity," Jiwon said. She showed her credentials to Vril, who nodded and stepped aside. Jiwon looked at Hyun, and her professional expression faltered. She had clearly seen the database report. Her eyes dropped to his scars and her face went pale. "You're really one of them," she whispered. "A ground zero survivor. Can I please put my shirt on?" Hyun asked again. Jiwon nodded quickly. "Yes, of course. I'm sorry." As Hyun dressed, Jiwon turned to Vril. "This man is a legal citizen with full travel rights. His documentation is legitimate. Whatever your scanners detected, it's not a current threat." "Not a current threat?" Vril's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Do you understand what those scars mean? Do you know what kind of weapon creates that pattern?" "I know exactly what they mean," Jiwon said firmly. "And I'm telling you he's not dangerous. The database says his planet was hit by a planet-killer weapon 23 years ago," Vril said. He turned to Hyun. "Which planet?" Hyun finished buttoning his shirt. He met Vril's eyes calmly. "Earth. I was there when they tried." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the background hum of the station seemed to fade away. Vril's translator made a small crackling sound as if struggling to process what it had heard. Earth? Vril repeated. But Earth is listed as destroyed. The records say the records are wrong, Jiwan interrupted. Earth survived. We all survived. Vril looked between the two humans. His multiple eyes blinked in confusion and growing horror. That's impossible. A planet-killer weapon doesn't fail. It destroys the target completely. It cracks the planetary core. Nothing lives, nothing. We did, Hyun said simply. How? Vril demanded. Hyun was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried through the silent checkpoint. We refused to die. Vril didn't understand. None of the aliens did. They stared at Hyun as if he were something from a nightmare or a myth, a being that shouldn't exist. I need to report this, Vril said finally. The Council Intelligence will want to know about this. We're going into lockdown. That's not necessary, Jiwan protested. He's just passing through. A survivor of a planet-killer weapon is not just passing through, Vril snapped. This is the most significant security event this station has ever seen. He turned to his officers. Seal all exits. No ships leave until Council Intelligence arrives. Warning klaxons began blaring throughout the station. Automated voices announced the lockdown in multiple languages. Travelers began panicking, demanding to know what was happening. Hyun stood calmly in the center of the chaos. He had expected this. It always happened when someone discovered what he was. The scars marked him as something that shouldn't be possible. Something that broke the rules of reality. Jiwan stepped closer to him. Are you all right? She asked quietly. I'm fine, Hyun said. I've been through worse than a security lockdown. I can imagine, Jiwan said. She paused, then added, I was born after the invasion. I've only heard stories about what happened. The stories don't do it justice, Hyun said. Vril approached them again, his weapon still drawn but pointed at the floor. You'll need to come with me. We have a secure holding facility. Council Intelligence is already en route. Am I under arrest? Hyun asked. I don't know what you are, Vril admitted. But until someone who understands planet-killer weapons can explain how you're standing here alive, you're the most dangerous thing on this station. Hyun nodded. He had heard similar words before. He followed Vril toward the secure facility, with Jiwan walking beside him. Behind them, the checkpoint remained sealed. Thousands of travelers were now trapped on the station, all because of the scars across one man's chest. As they walked through the corridors, Hyun could feel eyes on him. Word was spreading fast. The human who survived the impossible. The man who lived through a weapon designed to destroy worlds. He touched his chest briefly, feeling the raised tissue beneath his shirt. The scars had been with him for 23 years. They were a map of the day the world was supposed to end. A reminder of fire and screaming and the moment when humanity looked at death and said no. Vril led them to a reinforced door. It opened with a heavy thud, revealing a small, sterile holding cell beyond. Wait inside, Vril said. Don't try to leave. These walls can hold a Class 5 threat. Hyun walked into the cell without complaint. Jiwan started to follow, but Vril blocked her path. Only him, the security chief said. I'm his diplomatic liaison, Jiwan protested. And you can speak with him after Council Intelligence arrives, Vril said. Until then he waits alone. The door sealed shut. Hyun sat down on the single bench in the cell and closed his eyes. He knew what was coming. Questions, interrogation, demands for answers about things he wished he could forget. But he would answer. He always did. Because the galaxy needed to know what happened when someone tried to kill humanity. They needed to understand what humans became when pushed to the edge of extinction. He touched his scars again and waited for the questions to begin. The interrogation. The holding cell was designed to contain the most dangerous criminals in the galaxy. The walls were made of reinforced alloy that could withstand plasma fire. Energy fields hummed at every corner, ready to activate if the prisoner showed any sign of violence. Cameras watched from every angle. Hyun sat perfectly still on the metal bench. He had been waiting for 3 hours. He didn't seem bothered by the delay. Finally, the door opened. A being entered that made even the guards outside step back nervously. His name was Thek, and he belonged to one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His body was thin and tall, covered in pale skin that seemed almost translucent. Large black eyes dominated his face, missing nothing. I am Inquisitor Thek of the Galactic Council, he said. His voice was soft but carried absolute authority. I have traveled far to speak with you. Hello, Hyun said simply. Thek sat down across from him. Between them, a holographic display flickered to life, showing various documents and images. The Inquisitor studied Hyun for a long moment before speaking again. 23 years ago, an unidentified hostile fleet appeared in the Sol system. They deployed a planet-killer weapon against the third planet. According to all known physics and every historical record we have, that weapon functioned correctly. It should have destroyed Earth completely. Thek paused. Yet Earth still exists, and you sit before me, bearing the scars of someone who stood at ground zero when that weapon fired. That's correct, Hyun confirmed. Explain how that's possible, Thek demanded. Hyun was quiet for a moment, collecting his thoughts. What do you know about humans? Very little, Thek admitted. Your species only recently began interacting with the greater galaxy. Most assume you're a small population that survived on colony ships or orbital stations. The Council classified Earth as destroyed based on energy readings from the weapon discharge. We never told anyone otherwise, Hyun said. We were too busy rebuilding. Thek leaned forward. I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Start from the day the weapon fired. Hyun took a deep breath. He hated telling this story, but he knew it was necessary. I was a firefighter in Seoul. It was a normal morning. I was at the station when the alarm started. We looked up and saw the ships. The holographic display shifted, showing artist renderings of massive alien vessels hanging in Earth's sky. They didn't communicate. They didn't make demands. They just positioned themselves in orbit and powered up the weapon. Hyun's voice remained steady, but his hands clenched slightly. We had about 10 minutes of warning. People tried to evacuate, but where do you go when someone's about to crack your planet open? What did you do? Thek asked. My job. I helped people get to shelters. I pulled families out of collapsed buildings from the panic. I was in the street when the sky turned white. The memory was clear in Hyun's mind even after 23 years. The moment when everything changed. The moment that should have been the end. The weapon fired, Hyun continued. A beam of energy that pierced the atmosphere like it wasn't even there. It hit the ground about 2 kilometers from where I was standing. The heat came first. Everything around me started burning. The air itself was on fire. Thek's eyes widened. You should have been vaporized instantly at that range. I should have been, Hyun agreed. The initial blast wave threw me backward. I hit a building wall hard enough to break ribs. When I looked down, my uniform was burning. My skin was burning. I could see my own chest cavity through the wounds. The Inquisitor's face showed clear disbelief. Then you died. I should have, Hyun said again. But I didn't, none of us did. Not immediately. He pulled his shirt up, revealing the scars. Thek leaned closer, studying the pattern with intense focus. These marks show exposure to temperatures exceeding 10,000 degrees. They show plasma weapon traces. They show radiation levels that should have killed every cell in your body. Thek looked up at Hyun. How are you alive? We refuse to die, Hyun said simply. That's not a scientific answer. It's the only answer I have. Hyun pulled his shirt back down. I was lying on the ground burning. I could hear other people screaming. Buildings were collapsing. The air was full of ash and smoke. I looked at the crater where the weapon hit and saw people walking out of it. Impossible. I saw it with my own eyes. People with worse injuries than mine. Walking, crawling, dragging themselves away from the impact site. A woman carrying 2 children, her back completely burned, still moving. An old man with his leg gone, using a piece of metal as a crutch. We should have all been dead, but we kept moving. Thek pulled up medical data on the holographic display. These readings are from your current physical state. You show signs of massive historical trauma. Your bone density is abnormal. Your cellular structure has markers consistent with severe radiation poisoning, yet you function normally. Most days, Hyun said quietly. Tell me more about that day. What happened after the initial blast? Hyun continued his story. The weapon kept firing for about 30 seconds. It was trying to bore into the planet's core. We could feel the ground shaking. Buildings that survived the heat were falling from the seismic activity. I managed to get to my feet. I don't know how. My body shouldn't have responded to my commands, but it did. Did you see the weapon stop firing? Yes, it just cut off suddenly. Later we learned that the weapon had achieved its objective. It had cracked through the crust and reached the mantle. By all calculations, Earth should have started breaking apart within hours. But it didn't. No, it didn't. Hyun's voice took on a strange tone. something between pride and horror. The planet held together. Scientists still don't fully understand why. Some think it was the particular composition of Earth's core. Others believe it was something else. What do you believe? Thek asked. I believe humanity refused to let it happen. I believe billions of people simultaneously decided that we wouldn't die, and somehow that mattered. That had changed something. Thek stood up and paced the small cell. You're describing a phenomenon outside known physics. Consciousness doesn't affect planetary geology. Unless it does, Hyun said. Unless human consciousness is different somehow. The Inquisitor turned back to him sharply. Explain. Humans have a survival instinct that goes beyond normal biology. When we face death, something activates in us. We push past physical limits. We do impossible things. Usually it's small scale. A mother lifting a vehicle to save her child. A soldier fighting for hours with fatal wounds. But that day, it wasn't just one person. It was billions of us all refusing to die at the same moment. You think collective human will prevent planetary destruction? I think we bent reality by sheer stubbornness, Hyun said. I think the universe tried to end us and we said no loudly enough that it listened. Thek sat back down heavily. He studied Hyun's face, searching for any sign of deception or insanity. He found neither. What happened to the hostile fleet? The Inquisitor asked. Hyun's expression changed. The sadness left his eyes, replaced by something colder. We killed them. How? Your planet was devastated. Your military infrastructure was destroyed. Not all of it. And we didn't need much. We had nuclear weapons that survived in hardened silos. We had ships in orbital dry docks that could still fly. We had people who had just survived the impossible and were very, very angry. Thek pulled up more files. The Kreth Armada. I've been researching them. They were the hostile force that attacked you. Were they? Hyun asked. The Kreth Empire collapsed 23 years ago. Their military returned home broken and defeated. Civil war consumed their worlds. The empire fractured into dozens of smaller states. Thek paused. What did you do to them? We asked them a simple question, Hyun said quietly. How does it feel to die? You counterattacked. We did more than that. We showed them what humans become when you try to exterminate us. We showed them that weapons designed to destroy planets are useless against a species that refuses to acknowledge death. Thek's hands trembled slightly as he scrolled through more data. There are reports here of Kreth ships destroyed by impossible means. Vessels boarded by humans who should have died from vacuum exposure. Weapons that failed because humans manually tore them apart from the inside. One report describes a human pilot ramming his damaged fighter into a Kreth capital ship at near light speed. That was my brother, Hyun said softly. Daesun, he died destroying their command vessel. I'm sorry for your loss, don't be. He took 4,000 of them with him. He considered it a fair trade. The cell was silent for a long moment. Thek processed everything he had heard, trying to reconcile it with his understanding of reality. Why didn't humanity announce its survival? The Inquisitor finally asked. Why let the galaxy believe Earth was destroyed? We were busy. We had cities to rebuild. We had 3 billion dead to mourn. We didn't care what the galaxy thought of us. And now, what does humanity want? Hyun shrugged. To be left alone, mostly. To trade, to exist. We don't want revenge or conquest. We just want to live. The Council will need to verify your story. Then verify it. Send ships to Earth, talk to our government. There are millions of survivors like me. We all have the scars. We all remember. Thek stood again, preparing to leave. One more question. If another hostile force appeared tomorrow with another planet-killer weapon, what would happen? The aftermath. Thek sat alone in the station's observation room, watching recordings from destroyed Kreth ships. The footage had been recovered years ago from debris fields, but the Galactic Council had kept it classified. Now watching humans do the impossible again and again, the Inquisitor understood why. One clip showed a human boarding party attacking a Kreth destroyer. The humans wore damaged spacesuits that leaked air. They should have died from vacuum exposure within minutes. Instead, they moved through the Kreth ship for over an hour, destroying systems and killing crew members. When their suits finally failed completely, they kept fighting for another 10 minutes before their bodies shut down. Another clip showed a human with both legs destroyed, pulling herself across a battlefield using only her arms. She dragged an explosive device behind her. She reached her target, a Kreth weapons battery, and detonated it. The explosion killed her and destroyed the battery that had been firing on a human evacuation center. Thek watched dozens of similar recordings. Humans fighting past death. Humans refusing to stop even when their bodies had failed. Humans turning themselves into weapons when they had nothing else left. A tone chimed, announcing a visitor. The door opened and Jiwon entered. She had been granted permission to speak with Thek before he made his final report to the council. "Thank you for seeing me, Inquisitor," she said formally. "Sit." Thek gestured to a chair. "I have questions for you." Jiwon sat down carefully. She looked tired. "What do you want to know? Tell me about growing up on Earth after the invasion." She was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts. "I was born 3 years after the weapon fired. My parents survived the initial attack. My mother was in a shelter. My father was a doctor who worked for weeks without rest, treating injured people. What was Earth like? Broken, but healing. I grew up seeing the scars everywhere. Not just on people's bodies, but on the land. There are entire regions that are still glassed, still radioactive. We turned them into memorials, places to remember what almost happened." Thek pulled up an image on his display. It showed a massive crater surrounded by twisted metal and melted stone. "This is where the weapon hit. Seoul, or what was Seoul. 3 million people lived there. Most died in the first minutes. But hundreds of thousands survived long enough to evacuate others." Jiwon looked at the image without flinching. "My grandmother was one of them. She had burns over 60% of her body. She carried my mother, who was a child then, 15 kilometers to a shelter. The doctor said it should have been impossible for her to move, let alone run carrying a child. But she did. She did. She lived for another 16 years after the invasion, long enough to see me born, long enough to tell me stories about the day the world ended and didn't." Thek studied the young human woman. "You're proud of what your species did. I'm proud we survived. I'm not proud that we had to." Jiwon met his eyes. 3 billion people died. That's almost half our population. We didn't win that day. We just refused to completely lose. Do you know how many other species have survived a planet-killer weapon? None, Jiwon said. I've read the reports. 17 planets destroyed before Earth. The Kreth's weapon had a perfect record until they tried to kill us. Does that make you feel special? It makes me feel angry, Jiwon said, her voice hardening. We're not special. We're traumatized. Every single human alive today either lived through the invasion or knows someone who died in it. We carry that weight every day, and the galaxy didn't even know we survived. Why didn't Earth reach out? Why let everyone believe you were extinct? Because we were busy burying our dead. Because we had cities to rebuild. Because we didn't trust that the next species we met wouldn't try to finish what the Kreth started. Jiwon leaned forward. We survived one extermination attempt. We weren't eager to invite another one. Thek switched the display to show current images of Earth. Cities had been rebuilt. Green spaces had returned. Orbital facilities surrounded the planet. But you recovered remarkably fast. We learned from the Kreth technology, the ships they left behind, the weapons that didn't completely burn up in orbit. We reverse-engineered what we could. We used their own tools to rebuild. Jiwon smiled slightly. It seemed fitting. They tried to destroy us with advanced technology, so we used that same technology to come back stronger. The Council will want to inspect Earth. They'll want to verify everything Hyun told me. They're welcome to come. We have nothing to hide now. Earth is ready to be part of the galactic community. Jiwon paused. But we won't be a victim species. We won't be pitied or treated as refugees. We survived a planet-killer weapon. We expect respect, Thek nodded slowly. I believe you'll receive it. What you showed the Kreth, what your species is capable of, it changes everything the Council thought they knew about humanity. Good. We're tired of being underestimated. The Inquisitor stood and walked to the observation window. Outside, the station continued its normal operations. Thousands of beings from hundreds of species conducted trade and business, unaware that their understanding of the galaxy had just shifted. May I see Hyun? Jiwon asked. He's been in that cell for hours. Soon, I have one more interview to conduct. Thek turned back to her. Tell me about the Ground Zero survivors. How many are there? About 200,000 people were close enough to the impact site to receive the distinctive scarring pattern. Most of them survived, though many died in the years after from complications. Hyun is one of maybe 70,000 who are still alive. And they all bear the same scars? Yes, the pattern is unique to each person, but the type of damage is identical. It's like the planet killer weapon branded us. Jiwon touched her own chest unconsciously. I don't have the scars. Sometimes I feel guilty about that. Like I'm not a real survivor because I was born after. Survivor's guilt affects many species. But not like this. Not from something that should have killed everyone. Jiwon looked at Thek seriously. You need to understand something about Ground Zero survivors. They're different. Not just physically, but mentally. They've seen things that broke reality. They know on a level deeper than thought that humans can refuse death itself. It changes a person. Is Hyun dangerous? He's the gentlest person I've ever met. He works as a freight coordinator. He helps arrange shipments to colonies. He visits schools and talks to children about peace. Jiwon paused. But yes, he's dangerous. Every Ground Zero survivor is dangerous. Because if you threaten Earth again, if you threaten humanity, they'll show you exactly what happens when humans stop being gentle. Thek absorbed this information. He was beginning to form a picture of humanity that both fascinated and terrified him. The Council will need to establish protocols. Relations with Earth will need to be carefully managed. Earth doesn't need to be managed, Jiwon said firmly. We need to be respected. There's a difference. Before Thek could respond, an alert chimed. A new ship had arrived at the station. The Inquisitor checked his display and went very still. What is it? Jiwon asked. A Kreth diplomatic vessel has just docked. They're requesting permission to speak with the human Ground Zero survivor. Jiwon stood up quickly. The Kreth are here? No, it appears so. They've sent advance notice that they wish to offer a formal apology. Thek looked at Jiwon. Did Earth know they were coming? No. Our government has had no contact with the Kreth since the invasion. We assumed they wanted nothing to do with us after we destroyed 47 of their ships. Thek made a decision. I need to speak with the Kreth delegation first. Then, if appropriate, I'll arrange a meeting with all parties present. I want to be there when Hyun meets them, Jiwon insisted. I wouldn't dream of excluding you. This is a historic moment. The species that tried to exterminate humanity wants to apologize to a survivor of their attempt. Thek moved toward the door. Wait here. I'll return shortly. After the Inquisitor left, Jiwon sat alone in the observation room. She looked out at the stars and thought about her grandmother's stories. The old woman had described the day of the invasion in careful detail, making sure Jiwon understood what had happened. We were burning, her grandmother had said. Everything was burning. The air, the ground, our own bodies. I looked at your mother and thought, this is how we die. This is the end of everything. What changed? Young Jiwon had asked. Nothing changed. We just decided the end wasn't acceptable. We decided to keep going even though we were dead. And somehow, impossibly, we were right. Jiwon touched the window, feeling the cold surface. Somewhere on this station, Hyun sat in a cell, carrying the physical proof of that impossible day. Soon he would face the species that had tried to kill him. She wondered how he would react. Would he be angry? Forgiving? Indifferent? She realized she didn't know. Ground Zero survivors were difficult to predict. They had touched something beyond normal human experience. They had refused death itself and won. That kind of experience changed a person in ways that couldn't be measured or understood. The door opened again and Thek returned. The Kreth delegation is ready. We'll hold the meeting in conference room 7. It's large enough for security personnel and observers. How many Kreth? Jiwon asked. 3 delegates, including their chief xenobiologist from 23 years ago. He was on one of the ships during the invasion. He witnessed what happened. Hyun looked directly into the Inquisitor's eyes. We'd survive again, and the human refusal Admiral Torvin stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue planet rotate slowly beneath them. Earth, a primitive world inhabited by a young species that barely understood space travel. His fleet of 200 Kreth warships surrounded the planet like predators circling prey. The planet killer weapon is charged and ready, his weapons officer reported. Fire, Torvin commanded without hesitation. The weapon activated with a brilliant flash of light. Energy gathered at the front of the massive vessel, compressed into a beam of destructive force that could pierce a planet's core. The beam lanced downward, cutting through Earth's atmosphere in an instant. It struck the surface near a large human city. Torvin watched the impact with satisfaction. The energy readings were perfect. The weapon had performed exactly as designed. Within hours, the planet's core would destabilize. The crust would fracture, Earth would break apart like glass dropped on stone. Begin scanning for escape vessels, Torvin ordered. Destroy any that try to flee the system. No survivors. His crew worked efficiently. They had done this before. The Kreth Empire had destroyed 17 planets over the past century. Earth would be number 18. The humans had resources the Empire wanted. It was simpler to remove them than to negotiate. Admiral, the sensor officer called out. Something's wrong. Torvin turned sharply. Explain. The seismic readings. The planet should be showing catastrophic instability, but it's stabilizing instead. Check your instruments, Torvin snapped. The weapon functioned perfectly. Instruments are functioning correctly, sir. The energy penetrated the crust as expected. It reached the mantle, but the planet is holding together. Torvin moved to the sensor station and examined the data himself. The officer was correct. Earth should be coming apart. Instead, the seismic activity was decreasing. The planet was somehow absorbing the damage. Launch scout drones, he ordered. I want visual confirmation of the impact site. 6 drones descended through Earth's atmosphere. They approached the city that had taken the direct hit. Torvin expected to see a crater filled with molten rock. Instead, his displays showed something impossible. The city was destroyed. Buildings had collapsed. Fires burned everywhere. The ground was blackened and melted. But there were people walking through the destruction. Humans burned and bleeding, moving through conditions that should have killed them instantly. Zoom in on that figure, Torvin said, pointing at one human on the screen. The drone focused on a human male wearing some kind of uniform. Half of his body was burned. His chest showed exposed bone and tissue. He should have been dead. Instead, he was carrying 2 small humans, likely children, away from the impact zone. This is impossible, Torvin whispered. Another display showed a human female with her back completely burned, dragging herself along the ground while pushing a wheeled container ahead of her. The container held more small humans. They're not dying, the weapons officer said in disbelief. They should all be dead. Torvin watched screen after screen of humans surviving injuries that would have killed any Kreth instantly. They crawled through radioactive zones. They walked through fires. They kept moving when their bodies should have shut down. Perhaps their biology is more resilient than we estimated, the science officer suggested. No biology can survive this, Torvin argued. This violates fundamental principles of organic life. For 3 hours, the crew watched the drones send back footage of human survival. The humans weren't just alive. They were organizing. They were pulling each other from rubble. They were establishing rescue operations in the middle of a hellscape. They were refusing to die. Admiral, we're detecting launch signatures from the planet's surface, Tactical reported. Multiple missile launches, Torvin smiled. Finally, something normal. The humans were mounting a futile counterattack with primitive weapons. How many missiles? Counting continues, sir. Current count is over 300. No, wait, 500. 700. The tactical officer's voice rose in pitch. Sir, they're launching everything they have. Thousands of missiles incoming. Activate defensive systems. Those primitive weapons can't harm our ships. But the first wave of human missiles wasn't primitive. They were nuclear weapons, each carrying warheads powerful enough to vaporize a Kreth destroyer. The humans had launched their entire nuclear arsenal at the fleet. All ships evasive maneuvers, Torvin shouted. The Kreth fleet scattered, but the humans had launched too many weapons. Explosions bloomed in space as nuclear warheads detonated among the Kreth vessels. 12 ships died in the first 5 minutes. Their shields failed under the sustained barrage. Return fire, Torvin ordered. Destroy their launch sites. The Kreth fleet fired on Earth's surface, targeting military installations. But more missiles kept launching. The humans had hidden weapons everywhere. Underground silos, mobile launchers, submarines beneath the oceans. Even commercial vessels converted into missile platforms. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. Communications reported. Put it through. A human face appeared on the main screen. She wore a military uniform and looked directly at Torvin with cold eyes. This is Admiral Chewan of the Earth Defense Force. You tried to kill us. You failed. Now you get to learn what happens when you make that mistake. The transmission cut off. Torvin felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of military service. Fear. Sir, multiple vessels launching from Earth's surface, Tactical called out. They're civilian ships, but they've been modified. They're loaded with high explosives and heading straight for our fleet on collision courses. Torvin watched in horror as dozens of human spacecraft, none of them military vessels, accelerated toward his ships. They were civilian transports, cargo haulers, even pleasure craft. The humans had turned anything that could fly into a weapon. Shoot them down, he ordered. The Kreth fleet fired, destroying ship after ship. But the humans kept coming. Some of the civilian vessels got close enough to detonate, their explosions damaging Kreth destroyers. The humans were using kamikaze tactics, sacrificing themselves without hesitation. Why aren't they afraid? Torvin's second officer whispered. Why do they keep attacking? They're losing hundreds of ships. Because they're not trying to win, Torvin realized. They're trying to make us pay. A science officer named Reth approached the admiral. Sir, I've been analyzing the data from the planet killer weapon discharge. I believe I understand what happened. Explain quickly, Torvin demanded, watching another wave of human missiles approach. The weapon functioned perfectly from a physical standpoint. The energy penetrated the planet's core as designed. But something else happened simultaneously. Every human on that planet experienced mortal terror at the same moment. Billions of individuals faced death together. So what? Human psychology is unique, sir. They have an unusually strong survival instinct combined with something they call stubbornness. When faced with death, they don't accept it. They fight against it at a neurological level. Usually, this manifests as individual acts of unusual endurance. But in this case, billions of them did it at once. Torvin stared at Reth. Are you suggesting collective thought affected planetary geology? I'm suggesting that human will to survive became so strong it influenced reality itself. They refused to die so completely that the universe accommodated them. That's insane. Watch the screens, Admiral. We just tried to exterminate a planet, and the inhabitants are mounting a counterattack that's destroying our fleet. Everything about this situation is insane. Another explosion rocked the flagship as a human missile penetrated their shields. Damage reports flooded in. The Kreth fleet was taking severe casualties from an enemy that should have been dead. Sir, incoming ship on fast approach vector. Tactical shouted. It's a human fighter craft. Single pilot. He's not responding to our warnings. Shoot it down. We're trying, sir. He's evading all our fire. Torvin watched the small human ship weave through the Kreth defensive grid. It accelerated directly toward the command carrier. The pilot had to know it was suicide. No single fighter could damage a capital ship. The human ship struck the command carrier's shield at near light speed. The shield failed instantly. The ship kept going, punching through the carrier's hull like a bullet through paper. It detonated deep inside the vessel, and the entire ship began breaking apart. That was the command carrier Eternal Conquest, Reth said quietly. 4,000 crew, destroyed by one human who decided he'd rather die than let them live. Torvin felt his confidence crumbling. They were losing. A Kreth armada with planet-killing weapons was losing to a species they had just tried to exterminate. Order the fleet to retreat, he said finally. Sir? His second officer questioned. You heard me. Get us out of this system now. The Kreth fleet turned and fled. Behind them, Earth continued to burn, but it did not break. Humans continued to die, but they did not stop fighting. The planet-killer weapon had failed not because it didn't work, but because humanity refused to acknowledge its power. As the fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, escaping the Sol system, Torvin looked at the casualty reports. 47 ships lost, thousands of Kreth dead, defeated by a primitive species that should have been extinct. What have we done? He whispered. Reth stood beside H. Jiwon felt a chill run down her spine. One of the Kreth who had tried the Apology Conference Room 7 was designed for diplomatic meetings between hostile species. The room was large and circular, with multiple exits and security systems hidden in the walls. A round table sat in the center, sized to accommodate various body types. Guards from 3 different security forces lined the perimeter, watching everything. Hyun entered the room flanked by Jiwon and Thek. He wore the same simple clothes from the checkpoint. His expression was calm and unreadable. His eyes swept across the room, taking in the security measures and the 3 Kreth delegates waiting at the table. The Kreth looked similar to humans in basic structure, but their skin had a grayish tone and their eyes were larger, adapted for lower light. They wore formal diplomatic robes marked with symbols of their new government. All 3 stood when Hyun entered. One Kreth was older than the others, his face lined with age and what might have been regret. He stepped forward slightly. I am Reth, chief xenobiologist of the former Kreth Empire. I was on Admiral Torvin's flagship when we attacked your world. Hyun stopped walking. He looked at Reth for a long moment. I remember your ships. I imagine you do. Reth's voice was steady but quiet. May we sit? Yes. Everyone took seats around the table. Hyun sat across from the three Kreth delegates. Ji-won positioned herself beside him, ready to intervene if needed. Thek sat at the head of the table as neutral mediator. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting, one of the other Kreth said. His name badge identified him as Kelm, a diplomatic representative. We know this must be difficult for you. You know nothing about what's difficult for me, Hyun said flatly. The Kreth fell silent. Reth folded his hands on the table. You're correct. We don't know what you experienced. We can only imagine. And our imaginations are insufficient. Why are you here? Hyun asked. To formally apologize on behalf of the Kreth people, to acknowledge what we did to humanity, to ask if there's any way we can make amends for the attempted genocide of your species. Kelm spoke carefully, as if each word had been rehearsed many times. 23 years, Hyun said. It took you 23 years to apologize. We couldn't find you. We thought Earth was destroyed. We thought humanity was extinct. Reth leaned forward. The energy readings from the planet killer weapon showed a successful discharge. When our fleet returned home and reported what actually happened, no one believed them. They said we were making excuses for our failure. You did fail, Hyun said. We did, and that failure destroyed our empire. Reth gestured to his companions. The Kreth Empire collapsed within 2 years of the Earth invasion. Our military returned home traumatized. They spoke of humans who wouldn't die, who fought past any injury, who turned themselves into weapons. They said they had witnessed something impossible. We witnessed something impossible too, Hyun said quietly. We watched a planet-killer weapon fire and somehow survived it. The third Kreth delegate, a female named Vesa, spoke for the first time. Our people fell into civil war. Different factions blamed each other for the failed invasion, for attempting genocide in the first place, for bringing shame to our species. The empire broke into 37 separate governments. It took 20 years to form a new unified republic. And now you want forgiveness, Hyun said. It wasn't a question. We want you to know that we're sorry, that we acknowledge the horror of what we attempted, that we understand we can never undo what we did. Kelm placed a data chip on the table. This contains our formal apology, signed by all 37 governments. It also contains offers of reparations, technology, resources, territorial concessions. Whatever Earth wants, we'll provide it. Hyun looked at the data chip but didn't reach for it. Do you know how many people died? 3.2 billion, Reth said immediately. We've studied the records. We know the death toll. We know the cities that were destroyed. We know what we did. Do you know their names? The Kreth went silent. Reth shook his head slowly. I didn't think so. Hyun pulled his shirt up, revealing the scars across his chest. All three Kreth recoiled slightly. This is what your weapon did to me. These scars are a map of the energy pattern when your planet killer fired. I was 2 kilometers from ground zero. The heat should have vaporized me. Instead, I burned. I felt every nerve ending in my body die. I felt my skin melt off. I felt my heart stop and then start again because I refused to let it stay stopped. Reth stared at the scars with visible horror. I watched the footage from our drones. I saw humans walking through conditions that should have killed any organic life. I told Admiral Torvin that we had made a terrible mistake. You were right. Hyun pulled his shirt back down. You made a mistake. You tried to exterminate humanity and failed. You know what happened to your fleet. You know about the counterattack. 47 ships destroyed. 8,000 Kreth killed. Vesa's voice trembled slightly. My brother was on one of those ships. He died when a human pilot rammed his fighter into the vessel at near light speed. My brother died making that attack, Hyun said. His name was Daesun. He was 23 years old. He loved music and wanted to be a teacher. Instead, he died destroying your ships. The room was absolutely quiet. Even the security guards seemed to be holding their breath. I'm sorry, Vesa whispered. I'm so sorry about your brother. Are you sorry he died? Or are you sorry he killed your brother first? Vesa flinched. Both. I'm sorry the war happened at all. I'm sorry my people started it. I'm sorry for all of it. Hyun studied the three Kreth carefully. He saw genuine regret in their faces. He saw the weight they carried. He recognized it because he carried the same weight. My parents died in the initial blast, Hyun said. My mother was at home. My father was at work. They were vaporized instantly. I'm told they didn't suffer. I don't know if that's true or if people just say it to make me feel better. I'm sorry, Reth said. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring back 3 billion people. Sorry doesn't erase the scars. Sorry doesn't make the nightmares stop. Hyun's voice remained level, but something in his eyes had changed. Do you have nightmares, Reth? The old Kreth nodded slowly. Every night for 23 years. I see the humans from the drone footage. I see them walking through the fire. I see their faces. I see them refuse to die. Good, Hyun said. You should have nightmares. You should remember what you did. You should carry that weight until the day you die. We will, Kelm promised. Our entire species will. We've made the invasion a required part of our historical education. Every Kreth child learns about Earth, about what we tried to do and how we failed, about the price of attempted genocide. Jiwon spoke for the first time. What do you tell them about why you failed? The three Kreth looked at each other. Finally, Reth answered. We tell them the truth, that we encountered a species whose will to survive exceeded any biological limit, that humanity refused to die and somehow that refusal mattered more than physics, that we learned some things in the universe are stronger than weapons. Thek leaned forward. The Galactic Council needs to know if there will be continued hostility between the Kreth and humanity. If we need to establish buffer zones or mediate ongoing conflicts. There is no ongoing conflict, Hyun said. Earth has no desire for revenge. We rebuilt. We moved forward. We don't want war with the Kreth. What do you want? Vesa asked. Hyun thought for a long moment. Everyone in the room waited for his answer. Finally, he spoke. I want you to remember. I want every Kreth who looks at the stars to remember that humanity was there when you tried to kill us, and we're still here after you failed. I want you to tell your children what happens when you try to exterminate a species that refuses to die. We will, Reth promised. We already do. Then that's enough. Hyun reached out and took the data chip. I'll take your apology to Earth. I'll give it to our government. I can't promise they'll accept it. That's not my decision to make. We understand, Kelm said. We're grateful you'll even deliver our message. But you should know something, Hyun continued. Earth has been rebuilding quietly for 23 years. We've been studying your technology. We've been preparing. If any species, Kreth or otherwise, ever attacks us again, we won't just survive. We won't just defend ourselves. We'll show the entire galaxy what happens when you make humanity angry. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. All three Kreth paled slightly. That's not a threat, Hyun clarified. It's a promise. We survived a planet-killer weapon. We killed 47 military ships with nuclear missiles and suicide attacks. Imagine what we can do now that we've had time to prepare. Reth nodded slowly. I've spent 23 years imagining exactly that. It's part of why I'm here, part of why I wanted to apologize while I'm still alive, because I understand what humanity could become if you decide to take revenge. We won't take revenge, Hyun said, but we'll never forget what you did, and we'll make sure no one else forgets either. Thek spoke into the heavy silence. Does humanity accept the Kreth's formal apology? That's not my decision, Hyun repeated. I'm just one man with scars. Earth will decide as a collective. I'll deliver your message. What happens after that is up to our government. That's all we can ask for, Vesa said. Hyun stood up. The meeting was over. As he turned to leave, Reth called out one more time,